I'm going to go over some problems for you guys that are quiz review. This is day 6 in your packet. I'm going to go over just a few problems of GCF, a few groupings, and a few of the X problems. So hang with me just to get a quick refresher before your quiz. So I'm going to start with number 1. When it asks you to do the GCF, you're just looking at 2 and 6. What number can you divide both of those by? You can take out a 2. And then there's an x squared here, but there's no x's here, so you can't get rid of any. So I'm just going to open up my parentheses. And now looking at this very first term, it was 2x squared. I took out the 2. That means the x squared is still here. And I'm going to keep this minus sign. And it was 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. Remember, what you could do is you could factor this back in to make sure that it matches up with the question being asked. That's how to check your work for these. Let me try number 2. This one seems a little bit harder. I'm looking at 4, 12, and 4. I'm ignoring all the x's and the y's for just a second. But 4, 12, and 4, I can divide all 3 of those numbers by 4. Now let's look at the x's. X squared, x. The smallest of all of those is just a single x. Now let's look at the y's. There's 2 here, there's 1 here, there's 1 here. Again, the smallest one is just 1. So that forms my GCF. Now I just have to figure out what's left over. So there was a 4 here. I took it out, so there's no number here. There's a 1 there, but you don't have to put the 1. There was 1x. I took it out, so there's no x's. There were 2 y's. I got rid of one of them. That means there's 1 left. I'm going to keep this plus sign. Now it was 12. I divided by 4, which leaves 3. There were 2 x's here. I took out one of them, which leaves 1x left. There was a y. I took it out, so there's no y's left. So I'm going to keep this plus sign here. And I've got this 4. I took it out. There was an x here. I took it out. And there was a y here. I took it out. When there's nothing left, you still have to close your parentheses. There's still a blank here. You have to put something there. Remember to put that placeholder of a 1 in the spot, because this divided by itself gives you 1. It's not 0. You do need to have that 1 right there. Okay, let me go over a couple grouping ones. Let's take a look at number 4. Remember, when you see 4 things, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 things, which is different from the problems on the back. If you want to flip over, those are 3 things. Here I see 1, 2, 3, 4 things, all separated by pluses and minuses. That's called having 4 terms, which means I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2 and parentheses around the second 2. This is your strategy every time you see 4 things, 4 terms. This is b to the third. This is b to the squared. Which one is the smallest of those? This one. That's my GCF. And now I'm going to figure out what's left over. There were 3 b's here. I took out 2. That means there's 1 left. I'm going to keep this minus sign here. There were 2 b's here. I took both of them out. So remember, you have to have something in that spot. You can't put a 0. It's actually a 1, because b squared divided by b squared is 1. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this group. I see that there's a 2 here and there's a 2 here. Awesome. I'm going to pull out a positive 2, and there's nothing else to take out. This was 2b. I got rid of the 2. That means there is a b left. Here's my minus sign. That's going to stay. This was a 2 divided by 2. Again, I need to have a 1 there to hold the place. And if you notice, these 2 parentheses match. That means you're doing the problem right. You're on the right track, and that is the first part of your answer. Do you remember what the second part of your answer is? It's hanging out on the outsides here, the b squared and the positive 2. That's the second part of your answer. Let me do one more to make sure that you get it. This is our final answer. You leave it in the 2 parentheses like that. Let me try maybe a little harder one. How about this one? I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2, parentheses around the second 2, because there are 4 terms. You do this every time. In this one, there's an x to the third and there's an x squared. The smaller of those 2 is x squared. This just has a whole number 1 in front of it, and this is a 5, so there's no whole number that I can divide both of those by. It was x to the third. I took out 2 x's. That means there's 1 left, and I'm going to keep the x here, or the plus, excuse me. There was a 5 and an x squared. I got rid of the x squared, which means the 5 is still here. Okay, now if you notice, what both of these have in common is they both have a negative sign, so I'm going to take that out. And there's a number that you can divide 4 and 20 by. I know you're thinking 2, but there's a bigger number. You can divide this by 4 and you can divide this by 4, so I'm taking out the biggest number. That's why it's called greatest common factor. All right, there was a -4 there. I took out the -4. That means the x is still there. Now be careful here with this negative sign. I took it out. That sign is going to change to a positive. The negative came out here. That means I have a plus here now. And 20 divided by 4 is 5. See how the parentheses match? This one matches this one. That is awesome. That means that I am on the right track, which means the first part of my answer is x plus 5. Do you remember what the other part is? X squared plus 4. Or minus 4, excuse me. Now, some of you who are paying super duper attention in Algebra 1 might notice that this factors a little bit more. We'll get to that later. That's not the point of this question. Let's leave it like that and move on. Now I'm going to go on to the back page and do a couple of those problems for you. I'm going to go to 16, and I will refresh your memory on how to do this x thing. Do you remember what number goes in the top of the x? This one. Do you remember what number goes in the bottom of the x? This one, with the negative sign. So right now I have to think to myself, what 2 numbers multiply to 35, but add up to -12? So you got to think of all the multiples. This is the hardest part of this question. What times what is 35? I'm thinking 7 and 5. Is there any way that I can combine these two to make 12? It's a -12, so I have to be careful, but I think if I made these both negative, check with your calculator. -7 times -5 is 35, and -7 minus 5 is -12. You're going to have to think of those 2 numbers, and that is the hardest part. And it must fit this 4-piece puzzle. They have to multiply to this number, and they have to add up to this number. But once you find these 2, I am going to use these 2 numbers, and I am going to do what is called split the middle. I'm going to take that -12, and instead of writing -12, I'm going to write -7p and -5p. These 2 numbers replace this one. You're going to split it up. That's why it's called split the middle. And this p squared, I want that to stay in front, so I'm going to write it here. And this 35, I need to keep that at the end, plus 35. Let me move this over just a little bit now that I came up with those 2 numbers. And now do you guys recognize that it has 4 terms in it? So what I'm going to do is parentheses, parentheses, and I'm going to do exactly what I did on the previous 2 questions. So what do these 2 terms have in common? This has a p squared, this has a p, so I can take out the smaller of the 2, which is the p. There were 2 p's here. I took out 1. That means there's 1 left. Keep the minus sign here. There's a 7 and a p. I got rid of the p, which means just the 7 is left. Here, I've got this minus sign hanging out. It's never a good idea to start with a minus sign, so I'm going to factor it out. And I'm going to look at the 5 and the 35. I think I can divide both of those numbers by 5. And let's see, the minus sign came out, the 5 came out, the p is still there. And 35, be careful with this negative sign here. I'm dividing it by a negative, which is going to switch this sign, and it's going to be 7. And then remember, you guys, these 2 are supposed to match, so hopefully that will help you with those signs. When you factor out a negative, it came out of here, and that changes the sign here. Now that those 2 match, that's the first part of my answer. Do you remember what the second part is? P minus 5, the things hanging out on the outside. Okay. That is your crash course on the quiz. Remember to review those terms like monomial, binomial, trinomial, quartic, cubic, quadratic. Those things should be on your note card, and you are set to crush the quiz. Love you all. Thanks for watching.